from a Thich Nhat Hanh book titled Peace is Every Breath, a practice for our very busy lives. Opening words are entitled Waking Up. Waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to live fully each moment and to look at all beings and people and flowers with eyes of compassion. The body radiates energy early in the morning. In concentration, my heart is at peace. A half smile is born upon my lips, and indeed, this is a new day. I vow to go through it in mindful awareness. The sun of wisdom has now risen, and it is shining in every direction. Brenda, would you like to light our chalice for us this morning?
Just walk me through it.
Take the matchstick and transfer the flame from the candle over to our chalice. And then extinguish the matchstick. Let's see. Lighting this candle, offering the light to countless sentient beings, the peace and joy I feel brighten the face of the earth. Don't take that. Now, when I first get up in the morning, I try to lay in bed just for a few seconds before my feet hit the floor. And I try to kind of regroup and just to think, this is a new day. I have my list of things I want to accomplish, but it's a brand new day for things that I'm not even anticipating yet. And things I may add to the list. And things that I may never even get to on the list. But it's that moment of recollecting myself before I start the day that is that entrance point. So this morning, for our moment of centering silence, again, it is words by Thich Nhat Hanh. Is titled Inviting the Bell. Body, speech, and mind are one in perfect harmony. I send my heart along with the sound of a bell in the air. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxieties and sorrows. This morning, let us listen to the bell. When we share our sorrow, our suffering is cut in half. When we share our joy, our happiness is doubled. This is the cosmic mathematics of the soul. So this morning, let us light candles as we share this journey in the summer. I'm lighting this first candle. My twin twin sister and her husband are flying to Bangor tomorrow to spend a week or so to visit the family. My mom is very excited about that. So this candle is for safe travels in airports these days. And this candle is for Linda's mother. As you may have noticed in the support page, she moved this week from Presque Isle at Leisure Gardens to Holton, Madigan Estates. So she is in transition, and so is Linda. So that candle is for the whole family.
This is a candle of happiness. You won't believe it, but I finally saw a moose this morning. I've never seen a moose before in Maine, only in Nova Scotia. You won't believe where I saw this moose. I was walking the dog about 7 o'clock. I was near the corner of High and Park.
Wow.
My dog was taking care of business, and a moose cow comes running diagonally across the street. The dog looked up in amazement. She usually barks at the Amish horses, thinking they're large dogs. She was so amazed she couldn't say a thing. And I had forgotten my camera. But imagine, that's less than 2 blocks from here. A moose running around loose in town.
I realized from a text message this morning that I haven't done enough over the years to honor my best friend, Susan. And she's been my best friend since 1982. We traveled together on business in the summer. And I've taken for granted the fact that she's a teacher who teaches 5th grade. But she's really a teacher of children of that age who have reading limitations. And if you take teachers for granted, Susan is now 72. She's going into her 51st year of teaching 5th grade. Wow. And I say to her, you could resign. But she has all these skills, and I didn't always know how magnificent these skills were, that you can use phonetics and word associations and teach children that can't use sibilants to use sibilants. And it's just magnificent what she does. But during the year of COVID, she couldn't see her students except remotely. She lives in it's not a gated community, but they have a community association around a lake, a pond in Sturbridge. So last summer she started Beach Book Club, and she told the parents of her 5th grade students that the kids could come to the beach in masks, but they would be outdoors. And they now have a kids' beach book club reading. And so when she texted me this morning, she was going down to the beach with 5th graders to help them read. I think we all appreciate what great skill it is and how limited our lives would be if we couldn't read successfully. So I just wanted to honor her because I don't do it enough.
Candle of joy, somewhat like David's. Our younger daughter and 6-year-old granddaughter arrive in Portland at midnight tonight, and they'll be up here in a few days. We have not seen them for almost 2 years, or about 2 years, and they've not been back to Maine for 5 years, so this is exciting.
This is a double candle, one for a young, very young man, a boy really, with Down syndrome, whose cancer has returned. He's a grandson of one of our church members, congregational church members. So please keep Andrew in your prayers. And this is also a candle of joy for all the years we have worshiped here, and thanking you for all the work you're going to be doing in a couple of weeks. Thank you from the bottom of my heart and our hearts, and we hope to keep seeing you.
This is for all my family members that attended my Granny Hutch's life celebration, and they will be traveling home for their safe return home, and we had a really nice celebration. And it was over a year after her passing.
I'm lighting this candle for the recent rains and flooding in Europe, Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Christoph, did you want to mention anything or give us an update? Did you hear from your family in
Yes,
Germany?
yes, I talked to my brother and my sister, and both reported that it was a huge shock to the system, and they just did not anticipate such terrible, the Germans are very prepared usually and are very proud of that, but nature is stronger than what we put in its way sometimes. And the weather really was a deluge in the whole country. My sisters in Bavaria, my brothers in the Stuttgart area, and they've been out, and both of them had major groups of friends who've been affected by it. So I'm deeply touched, and thank you for remembering that.
We're a global community. It's feeling more and more so these days. And this is a silent candle for any unspoken prayers this morning, concerns that we carry. And any names you'd like to share this morning, please speak those loud.
Nancy.
With Cricket and Corbin.
Alice,
Lucas.
Elaine, Charles.
Alan.
And now may the love that encircles us encircle all. May those who endure hardship find relief. May those who suffer in body or mind experience healing. May we find ways to assist and benefit those in need, for in so doing, we benefit ourselves and all. The universal is discovered in each small heart. We are one on this day. Blessed are we all. Amen. Blessed be. For our group reading today, it's number 527. And this is our summer meditation. It's on time and its fleeting nature, but also its timeless and eternal nature. This reading is by Richard Jeffries, and let us read it in unison. It is eternity now. I am in the midst of it. It is about me, sunshine. I am in it, as the butterfly in the light laden air. Nothing has come. It is now. Now is eternity. Now is the import of life. Flying, bus trips, moving around, and family. We haven't seen each other for months or years. But the COVID numbers are are concerned nationally here in the state of Maine. Numbers and cases are rising. So this candle is for our country and various parts of the world that are struggling with containing the coronavirus. To remain aware and vigilant through this summer, to be safe and to protect our family and children, but to realize how vulnerable we are. It's a beautiful world, and I find that poetry is one of, and flowers and water, it's one of the great assets of summer. So Steve Kinney is our special speaker this morning. I get the Sunday off, and he's going to be sharing some poetry inspired for summer. So Steve, come and share with us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I actually thought I would start by asking if anybody in the group happens to be an expert in obscure poets of the late 19th century. I'll blunder on that. I made some copies. I'm going to speak about, eventually I'll ramble on and then I'll read a little poetry and ramble on again, but I'm going to speak about Gerard Manley Hopkins' The Wind Hover. Now, does anyone know the poem? It's a favorite of mine. So I'm going to start by saying the first Sunday in June, at least for me, it was my first time returning to this church, and my first time being out and around people again. I really was in isolation during the pandemic. And I will admit, I was sitting in one of those comfortable rocking chairs, and I was kind of overstimulated by being out and around humanity again. And I think you'll remember, Dave mentioning being on a bike ride and seeing a bear? That Sunday? Well, he never said bear. He said shiny, black, lumbering, and I think we all knew he wasn't talking about a cat or a skunk, he was talking about a bear. And I sat in that chair, and because he had said, it was in the morning, he had a sighting, and it was obviously a moment for him. I sat in that chair and I thought about this poem, and I don't remember everything that happened during the rest of the service, because I was working the wind over in my head throughout. I want to talk briefly about poetical language. I had the good fortune of being dragged screaming and kicking away from the farm to college, and went through the liberal arts kind of program. And I did indeed take a course in Romantic and Victorian poets, and I love them and read them still. I had a full year's course in the plays of Shakespeare. I don't remember much. But what really turned me on to poetry happened in a 2-hour lecture Thursday afternoon. Professor Arthur Modier, and he was director of drama at Mount Allison University. And we had been assigned to read The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams. And he opened his lecture by talking about the poetical language of Tennessee Williams in the play The Glass Menagerie. And I'm sure one of us 19-year-old geniuses put our hand up and said, Professor Modier, this is a drama class. We're not studying poetry. You're maybe in the wrong room kind of thing. And that's when Arthur Modier launched. And he described to us what poetical language was. It is not the property of people who call themselves poets. It is what humanity defaults to when an emotion needs to be expressed, or a moment needs to be described, and we suddenly we default to heightened language. And Arthur Modier went on to say that language became heightened when it became highly elusive, when a few words, the glass menagerie, could allude to so much else. And he could have said it when it becomes metaphoric, but he didn't, and I love those choices of words. And so that took us back to talking about the Glass Menagerie. And I don't know, most of you will probably know about Tennessee Williams. He's of our generation, a bit older. And Tennessee Williams, we know this, that he disciplined himself to become a writer. He could only find employment as a young man in the South doing menial jobs, and he disliked it so much that he made himself write one short story a week and try to get it published. And he eventually could make his living as a writer, but he did not ever have an outline. He didn't get up in the morning with a thesis that he was going to develop like an essayist might. He got up every morning and wrote whatever was in his head. And in Tennessee Williams' head, he grew up in what we would call a dysfunctional family today in the South. His father was an alcoholic traveling salesman who, when he was home, was abusive. His mother was kind of daffy, but the center of his life, throughout his life, was his sister Rose, who I think in the 40s, she was schizophrenic, and her mother agreed to have her have a full frontal lobotomy. And this is the thing in Tennessee Williams' life that he never quite got through. And he wrote The Glass Menagerie. It was his breakthrough play. And the central character is Laura. And she sits throughout the play, if you've seen it. She spends most of her time on the floor playing with glass animals. She has farm animals, horses and dogs and cats and birds and stuff that are made of glass. And in Tennessee Williams' world, that is her world. And her world, Laura in the play, is undisguised. It is his sister, Rose. And it's glass and it's fragile. But Tennessee Williams, whose real name was Tom, the narrator of the play, when I saw it, he stood up over in that corner of the stage and he watched the scenes unfold and narrated them. But his decision is, will I spend my life with this glass menagerie? Will I be kept in the world of the sister who needs my protection? Or will I flee to find some source of normalcy? And he did indeed flee. And Tennessee Williams said throughout in his life that he lived in many cities. He lived in New Orleans, Los Angeles, Italy, had a home in Key West. But he said, I go to many places, I seek adventures, other words, my life will be a downward spiral. So he went seeking adventure. In the play, I did do a little reading preparing for this today, and I came across some words from the play. The narrator, Tom, Tennessee Williams' character, in the very end, he's in a strange city, like Tennessee Williams. He's walking at night along a street, and he does not have a companion. He mentions that. And he goes by a glass window of a shop. And the shop sells perfume. And the narrator, Tom, said, the window is filled with pieces of colored glass. Tiny, transparent bottles in delicate colors like bits of a shattered rainbow. And he concludes with feeling his sister, who is no longer with him, touching his shoulder. And he said, I tried to leave you behind me, but I am more faithful than I intended to be. So Tennessee Williams, in a play, in dialogue, carries poetical language through to the very last words. And that was my introduction from Professor Arthur Modier of how I would come to engage with poetry. So Gerard Manley Hopkins, Dave told us about seeing we think it's a bear. We're pretty sure it's a bear because he alluded to its qualities. And it was a moment. Gerard Manley Hopkins was a Jesuit priest living in Dublin, Ireland. And he goes out on a morning walk, like Dave was on his bike, like we've heard about Thoreau's morning habits and rituals. And he was out on his morning walk, and he was in an open field. The windhover, again, I read up on it a little bit, is the common name in England for a bird known as a kestrel. And a kestrel is a small member of the falcon family. And a little bit of the science about how they navigate, because when you read these words, you know that Hopkins knows about this. They are called windhover because they fly over open fields and out in the woods, and they fly into wind, and when they hit a certain current called a thermal, they cease to fly. They hover there. And of course, they're hovering before they dive for prey. And so he encountered this in the morning, and I can't get over it, but this language causes you to. So this Jesuit priest saw a bird, went back to his room, and he wrote, I caught this morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's dauphin, dappled dawn-drawn falcon in his riding of the rolling level underneath him steady air, and striding high there, how he rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing in his ecstasy. Then off forth on the swing, as a skate's heel sweeps smooth on a bow bend, the hurl and gliding rebuffed the big wind, my heart in hiding stirred for a bird, the achiever, the mastery of the thing. If you have ever heard more heightened language, share it with me. It just blows me away. I memorized it in college. My nephews have had to hear it in the car. I can't do the whole thing all through, but I didn't read the final 6 lines, and I just think those first 8 lines are so magnificent. Description of a moment seeing a bird. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Hopkins because he's interested me so much. He was born in the mid-19th century to an upper-class British family, not aristocracy, but intellectuals. His mother was a highly educated woman, unusual in that age. His father owned a merchant marine insurance company, insured ships going to sea. But his father was also the literary and poet critic for the Times of London. He had a brother amongst the 8 siblings. He had a brother whose scholarly specialty was colloquial phrases of the Chinese language. Can you imagine the dinner table conversation in this family? And they were deeply religious, devout. They were high church Anglicans. And in his mid-20s, Hopkins, who was even more deeply religious, became totally smitten with Catholicism. And he came to his family and said that he was converting to Catholicism. He became estranged for the rest of his life from his family as a result. And he not only converted, but he entered the seminary to become a Jesuit priest. He did not do particularly well in the seminary. Oh, I forgot to mention the important part here. When he went to the seminary, when he joined, he came to his own personal conclusion that the mere act of writing poetry was prideful, and that using poetry to describe and praise material beauty was an offense to God. So in his own little ritual, he had a bonfire, set all of his poetry on fire, and we lost it. And he was in his mid-20s when that happened. He had been a poet since he was a child, encouraged by this intellectual family. And he really did do that. Later in his career as a priest, he decided that if his poetry praised nature, you just heard it, that's a bird, then it was good in the eyes of God, and he would continue to write. And we have the poetry today. But that's not all he did. And you'll know this from what I just read. He generously said that Tennyson had so perfected metered verse that there was nothing left for him to do, and he had to create something new that was his own. Now, metered verse, you all know in school, iambic pentameter, ba-da, ba-da, ba-da. So he said, I can't do that anymore. I've got to create something that sings more. So he invented strung rhythm. An iambic pentameter is 1 line, 5 phrases, 5 meters, each meter 2 syllables, and that's how poetry was, and it rhymed at the end. And he said, no, I'm going to write in feet, and 1 foot can be 4 syllables, 5 syllables, 6 syllables, and I'll put the beat in many places. And when you just heard this, man, when you read it yourself, I caught this morning. Morning's been the kingdom of daylight still. I mean, it just builds. It's ecstatic use of language. And he did that, and he did not do that as a member of a group of poets or intellectuals at the time. He had isolated himself in a place he didn't like, in a church that had caused him to be estranged from his family, and he said he spent his life determined to avoid melancholia. In other words, he tended towards depression, and yet he gave us words like this. And I think strung rhythm, and there are scholars who make this argument, that had he not liberated language in this way, Dylan Thomas would have had to figure it out on his own. And so would T.S. Eliot. And when you go to the 50s and 60s in New York, Allen Ginsberg, that group of poets called themselves the Beats. Well, this is where the Beats got their start. He really did open it up, and very few people know about him. He was an obscure poet. Oh, and by the way, he was not published in his lifetime. When he would write, when he went to his room and wrote The Windhover, he immediately wrote a letter to Robert Bridges, his friend, and said, I have written my masterpiece. He knew it. And Robert Bridges, many years later, became Poet Laureate of Great Britain and got his work published 40 years after his death. So that's Hopkins' Life, my favorite poem. I wanted to kind of bring it around, and earlier in the week I called Dave. I've been on business, and I was calling Dave to say, haven't talked to you, I guess you probably don't need me on Sunday, and before I could get that out, Dave was like, I'm so looking forward to what you're going to talk about on Sunday. So it was on, and Dave said, I need a title to go in the email. I said, oh, I've been thinking about the title, actually, and I want you to use the title, Maybe Spiritual After All. And I'm paraphrasing, forgive me for this, but Dave was kind of on the verge of saying, you know, well, we're Unitarians, you don't have to go that far, just talk about your poem. And I said, no, I kind of have this thing I want to bring it around to. When I was very young, I've been a committed atheist since I was a kid. And I went to church with my parents. I didn't buy everything I was hearing. I will also, you know, a little confessional part of it, I was growing up gay in a rural area of farm country, the Bible Belt in eastern Canada. And I knew if they were getting my reality that wrong, that other things couldn't be quite right. So I told my parents at a very early age that I was an atheist. And I didn't really want to go to church. And the takeaway from that is it's a lot easier to tell your parents that you're an atheist than it is to tell them that you're gay in 1973 or so. And that happened many years later. But I've always had this. A couple of years ago, I was approached on the street. I was walking my dog on Spring Street where I live, and two young men approached me, and I remember it was winter because my dog had to jump up on a snowbank to see them. And they said, could we have a few moments to share the Word of God? And I have an immediate wall that goes up, no, gay atheist, you don't need to do that. Throughout my life, and after I moved back to Holden, I was frequently in need of, I saw a therapist a lot. I went to therapy a lot. That's a whole different story. But I knew when I came to Holden I would need to find somebody. I found this incredible young man I was referred to in Bangor. And it turned out by coincidence, he told me that he comes from Holden. He grew up in Holden. And when he's back here, he said, I occasionally talk at the Unitarian Church. You should go there. They're kind of your people. And, he would listen to me. And when you have a therapist, and it's a good one, they will discuss whatever your diagnosis might be, and they may address whatever acute issues you have, but they're also a life coach. And at one point, this young man said to me, look, you come in here with this gay atheist stuff, you really need to drop this, put this wall down, because you also come in here and we'll talk about something you quote a line of poetry. Or you have seen a symphony orchestra on Sunday and it's Monday and you can't stop talking about it. When you do that, all that's happening is your spirit is being lifted. Your spirit is flying. You're surrendering your spirit to something bigger and outside of yourself. And that's spirituality. It's all it is. It's that simple, and you need to stop complicating it. That talk actually opened a door for me. And I wrote my wrap-up because I had to give Dave a title, and I kind of wrote this because every time I practice it, it kind of gets long. And so maybe spiritual after all. And so this is what I wrote down here to stop talking. Concluding that spirituality was as simple and as already present in my life opened new doors through a wall I had spent years building. One of those doors was to enter this building and come to these services and to seek out the fellowship you offer here. Dave seeing a bear, Hopkins seeing a bird, Arthur Monier expounding on heightened language, and my therapist knocking down a door for me, were just signposts along the way. So thank you for letting me ramble on this morning. I hope you enjoy Hopkins.
Thank you, Steve, for sharing summer meditation this morning. Yeah, I can't think of a better description of raising our spirit, opening the sensitive, aware soul that so easily shut down by a long list of things you can name. So I find as well, coming here and sharing with a small community of seekers, of creative minds, looking for this inner, special, felt life that is our own and that can be shared, is what we're trying to accomplish in a beautiful town like Holton, in a small community, as we walk these streets, you never know when you're going to see a moose, a bear in the country, or birds of prey hunting flat grasslands, old potato fields gone to pasture. Maybe spiritual after all, Stephen. Thanks for making that extra effort, tying it in. So let us extinguish the chalice for now. We'll chat a bit off camera in a moment. As we extinguish the chalice, we continue with our day knowing that it has been good to be together, even if but for a short period of time, 15 minutes to spare. Let us walk in love. Let us look and seek for wonder and the unexpected and beauty. May peace and kindness accompany us all on this day and in this week, this summer. Amen.
That's a wrap.